I arrived at my son's house 10 minutes early, the way I always did on Christmas. The driveway was full, and I could see people through the dining room window. Some were neighbors, some were friends of Michael and Laura. I walked in quietly, hung my coat on the rack, and carried the small tin of cookies I baked that morning. Nothing fancy, just something I always brought. The moment I stepped into the dining room, I felt the shift. Conversations lowered by half. Eyes moved toward me, then away just as fast. Laura didn't greet me. She simply glanced up, then went back to arranging her napkin like she needed something to control. I pulled out a chair at the end of the table. No one said a word. The food was already served, plates full, glasses filled. Mine was empty. I didn't comment. I'd learned long ago not to expect much from this house. Michael stood at the far end next to Laura. His shoulders were stiff, his jaw tight. It was the look he used when he was preparing to say something unpleasant, but wanted to appear in charge. He tapped his fork against his glass, like he was making some official statement. "Mom," he said, loud enough to stop every conversation. "You wasted space tonight. You're not needed here." There was no hesitation, no shame, just the words, clean and sharp. I looked up at him. "Wasted space?" I repeated. Not because I didn't hear him, but because I wanted to see if he'd stand by it in front of a full table. He did. Laura leaned back in her chair and smiled. She put a hand on my chair and pushed it back a few inches. The scrape of wood against the floor was loud in the quiet room. "There's no room left, Marion. We're tight on seats," she said, her voice sweet, but her eyes anything but. Victor, her brother, chimed in from the other side of the table. "Yeah, we're packed tonight. Probably best if you let the younger ones stay." Younger ones. He was 38. People around the table shifted. Some looked embarrassed. None spoke. I kept my hands folded in my lap. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I had learned over the years that silence can be louder than any argument. I stood up, pushed the chair back in with my own hands, steady, controlled, and said, "Then I'll leave you the room you need." No one stopped me. No one asked me to sit back down. Not even a half-hearted, "Wait, don't go." They watched. Some avoided eye contact entirely. I picked up my coat from the rack. It was still cold from the car. As I buttoned it, I saw Laura whisper something to Michael. He didn't look at me. He didn't look anywhere near me. Outside, the snow had started falling again. Soft flakes, slow and steady. I walked down the driveway without turning back. The sound of laughter rose behind the closed door, louder now that I was gone. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled out quietly. The road towards Snowpine was mostly empty. Streetlights reflected off the snow, making the pavement glow faintly. My hands stayed steady on the wheel. My breath didn't shake. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just very clear. It takes a certain moment in life to realize a line has been crossed for the last time. When I reached my cabin, the porch light came on exactly the way I set it. A simple sensor, but it felt like someone saying, "You're home." I brushed the snow off my coat and stepped inside. The air was cold, but it was my cold, the kind I could warm on my own terms. I set the tin of cookies on the counter and plugged the kettle in. As I waited for the water to heat, I reached for my phone. I hadn't checked it all evening. The screen lit up bright. 35 missed calls, all from Michael. 6 calls in the last 10 minutes, 9 in the half hour before that. The rest from the moment I walked out of his house. Not one from earlier. Nothing before he humiliated me. Nothing resembling concern. 35 calls after. I unlocked the phone and scrolled through the list. No messages, not a single text. Just repeated calls, one after another, like he was trying to put out a fire he had only just noticed he started. I set the phone down. The kettle clicked off. I made my tea and carried the mug to the small table by the window. My plate at the dinner table may have stayed unfinished, but I had a warm drink now, and it didn't come with judgment. The phone lit up again, another call from Michael. I didn't answer. I watched it ring until it stopped. A few seconds later, another call. 5 rings. Silence. Then another. I picked up the phone, looked at the screen, and let it ring out again. I wasn't ready to hear whatever version of panic he was experiencing. Not tonight. I sat back in the chair, wrapped both hands around the mug, and listened to the snow hitting the window. Steady, soft, predictable. Everything that my son had not been for years. When the phone buzzed again, it vibrated against the wooden table, rattling a little. I turned it face down. The cabin went quiet once more. In that quiet, something shifted in me. Not bitterness, not defeat, something simpler, cleaner. Recognition. They had pushed me out. They had done it publicly, and they expected me to play along with their shame. But I didn't collapse. I walked away. On my own feet, with my own dignity, and now, with 35 missed calls blinking in the dark, it was clear they finally understood one thing. They no longer had control. I took another sip of tea, warm and steady, and looked out at the snow gathering on the trees. I wasn't the wasted space in that room. I had simply been standing in the wrong place. Tonight changed that. I woke up in the cabin earlier than usual, the kind of early that comes after a night of too much clarity. Snow pine mornings are blunt, cold, bright, and honest. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and boiled water for tea. The phone was still where I left it on the table, face down. No new calls, no texts, nothing. Whatever urgency Michael had last night had turned into silence. I poured the hot water over the tea leaves and stood by the window. The pines were covered in snow, bending but not breaking, strong, steady, something I could appreciate that morning more than usual. A knock came at the door, light, familiar. I opened it to find Caroline standing there, bundled in her heavy coat, holding a thermos and a brown paper bag. "Breakfast," she said, "and before you tell me you're fine, I already know you're not." I stepped aside to let her in. "You always show up too early." "You always pretend you don't need it," she replied, setting the bag on the counter. She unpacked eggs, bread, and a small jar of jam. "You want to tell me what happened last night?" she asked. I sat at the table. Michael told me I wasn't needed at Christmas dinner, said it in front of everyone. Laura added her usual touch. Victor, too. Caroline stopped slicing bread. "They said it like that? Out loud?" "Yes." She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed, like someone who expected better from people and got the opposite. "And you left quietly, didn't you?" she asked. I did. Caroline put a plate in front of me. "I'm not asking this because I think you're weak. I'm asking because I want to know what you're planning." "I'm not going back there," I said. "They wanted space. They can have it." Caroline nodded once, the way she does when something makes complete sense. "Good. So what now?" "Nothing yet," I said. "Just clarity." Before either of us spoke again, another knock sounded at the door, firmer this time. When I opened it, Ruth McKinley stood there, her coat covered in snow, gloves in her hand. She walked in with purpose, not hesitation. "I heard you're back in the cabin," she said. "I am. And I heard something happened yesterday." "It did," I said. Ruth didn't offer sympathy. She didn't widen her eyes or gasp. She looked at me the way a surgeon looks before making the first incision, direct and sure. "Good," she said. "Now you're ready." "Ready for what?" I asked. "For work," Ruth replied, taking off her gloves. "Real work. Something that strengthens your hands and your mind. I want you at the Snow Pine workshop. The guild is opening a new cycle, and we need steady hands. You've got those." Caroline leaned against the counter, watching me. "See? I'm not the only one saying it." I raised an eyebrow at Ruth. "You think I need a distraction?" "No," she said. "I think you need a space where people see you for who you are, not for what they want from you." That was Ruth. Direct, sharp, no sugarcoating. It was part of why I had always respected her. "What exactly would I be doing?" I asked. "We'll start simple," she said. "Cutting, shaping, working with basic pieces. Wood doesn't lie. It responds to patience, not pressure, and it doesn't care who embarrassed you yesterday." I held her gaze for a moment. She wasn't pitying me. She was offering something solid. "Why now?" I asked. Because yesterday told you everything you needed to know, she said. And because you're not the kind of woman who sits in a cabin waiting for apologies. Caroline smiled. She's right. I took a breath, steady and slow. What time do you need an answer? By noon, Ruth replied. She started putting her gloves back on. If you come, wear warm clothes, and don't worry about skill. Precision comes with consistency. When Ruth stepped back outside, Caroline closed the door behind her, then turned to me. You know you're going to say yes. Do I? Yes, she said, because you didn't walk out of that house to sit still. You walked out to reclaim something. I walked to the window again. The snow had stopped, leaving the forest still and clean. My cabin wasn't big, but it felt honest. It didn't judge. It didn't demand anything. The chair scraping at the dinner table, Michael's voice saying I wasted space. The silence afterward. 35 missed calls. None of it broke me. It clarified things. I'll go, I said. Caroline folded her arms. Good. You need people who value you, and you'll find them there. I grabbed my coat from the hook. Then at 2 o'clock, I'll be at the workshop. Caroline stepped closer. Marion, you know this already. But leaving last night? That was strength, not defeat. I know, I said. She smiled softly. And when Michael calls again, because he will, don't let him rewrite what happened. I won't. Caroline finished her tea and headed to the door. I'll stop by later. I want to see how your first day goes. When she left, the cabin felt open, like the air had changed. Not lighter, just clearer. I looked at the phone on the table, still silent. I picked it up, turned it over, and then put it in the drawer. I wasn't waiting for it to ring. At 2 o'clock, I wasn't going back to the humiliation from last night. I wasn't going back to the version of myself that tolerated it. I was going forward, to the workshop, to the guild, to something that belonged to me. When I reached the Snowpine workshop that afternoon, the parking lot was half covered in packed snow, the kind that crunches under your boots. The building itself looked simple from the outside. Big windows, wooden beams, a metal roof. But I could hear tools running inside. Real work. No pretending. No performance. Ruth was already at the entrance, holding the door open with her shoulder. You're on time, she said. I said I'd be here. That's all I need, she replied. Come in. The warmth inside hit me immediately. Not cozy, but practical. Heaters running, sawdust in the air, noise from machines humming like a steady heartbeat. People were working at different stations, some carving, some sanding, some carrying planks across the room. No one stared at me. No one questioned why I was there. That alone felt different from yesterday. Ruth walked me toward an empty workstation. It had a sturdy table, clamps, a fresh pair of gloves, and a neatly stacked set of tools. This is yours, she said. You keep it clean? You keep it organized. This is your place. I nodded. What do you want me to start with? A table, she said. An evergreen table. Round. Clean lines. Balanced. I looked at her. You're starting me with a full project? Not the whole thing, she said. You'll learn piece by piece, but the end goal is the evergreen. It's a challenge, not a punishment. Caroline, who had stopped by before heading to town, leaned against a post nearby. She learns fast, she said. Ruth didn't turn. Good, she'll need to. I took a breath and looked around the workshop again. No one was laughing behind my back. No one whispering. No one pushing chairs out from under people. Just work, just people focused on their hands and their tasks. Ruth handed me a measuring tape. First lesson, measure without guessing. Guessing ruins wood. I pulled the tape across the plank she placed on my table. 32.5. Good, she said. Mark it. Mark? I picked up a pencil and marked the board. Now measure again. I did. Still 32.5. That's how you start, Ruth said. You confirm. People who skip that step make sloppy work. I understood what she was really saying. Sloppy work wasn't tolerated here. Neither was sloppy living. She set the plank against the saw. Your turn. Using the table saw? I asked. Yes, I'll stand beside you once. After that, you stand by yourself. I positioned the plank, squared it, adjusted my stance. Ruth nodded once. "You're steady," she said. "Go ahead." The blade cut through the wood cleanly. The sound was sharp, controlled. The cut was straight. Ruth inspected the edge. "Not bad. Do it again." We repeated the process with another plank, then another. Every time I finished a cut, I felt something settle inside me. Not pride, just certainty. Certainty that I could still build something, even after being told I was a waste of space. A few of the younger guild members glanced over occasionally. Not mocking, curious. One of them, a girl in her 20s with red earmuffs, walked over after my third cut. "You knew?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She looked at the plank, then at me. "That's straight, straighter than most of the newbies." "Thank you." She smiled once and walked away. Small moment, but honest. Ruth came back with a sanding block. "Next step," she said. "Smooth the edge." I started sanding, keeping my strokes even. "You're working like someone who's done this before," Ruth said. "I haven't," I replied. "You've lived long enough to understand discipline," she said. "That's close enough." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. For the next hour, I measured, cut, sanded, and organized. Ruth didn't hover, but she stayed within sight, nodding at the right moments, correcting small things without making me feel like a beginner. Caroline stayed a bit longer, watching with a quiet smile before heading out. At one point, two young men whispered something and laughed while glancing toward my table. Ruth walked straight up to them. "If you're going to laugh at someone," she said, "you better be able to cut straighter than her. Can you?" Their faces dropped. One shook his head. "No, ma'am." "Then get back to work," she said. They did. I didn't react. I didn't need anyone to defend me. But it told me something important. In this place, respect wasn't handed down. It was earned through consistency, through skill, through how you carried yourself. After another cut, Ruth stepped beside me. "How do you feel?" "Steady," I said. "Good. The evergreen table isn't built in a day. It's built by showing up consistently. People think talent matters most. It doesn't. Discipline does." "I can do discipline," I said. "I know," she replied. She handed me a cloth to wipe down the station. "Clean up, then take a look around the workshop. This is your environment now." I did exactly that. I wiped the table, put the tools back where they belonged, swept the dust into the bin, and hung the tape measure on its hook. Then I walked around the workshop slowly. People nodded at me, not out of politeness, but out of acknowledgement. A few glanced at my station, at the straight cuts I had made. I didn't preen. I didn't smile to seek approval. I simply kept walking. When I returned to my station, Ruth was waiting with a folded sheet of paper. "Your project outline," she said. "If you commit to it, you'll have something real in your hands." "I'll commit." She nodded once. "Good. Then you're part of the guild now." Not a ceremony, not applause, just a clear statement, and honestly, it meant more than any forced apology Michael could ever give. I hung my gloves on the hook and took a last look around. For the first time in a long while, I was in a place where my presence wasn't questioned, not wasted, not dismissed, not pushed out. This room had space for me, real space, real. When I entered the workshop the next morning, the lights were still warming up. The heaters hummed, but the air had that early morning chill. I walked toward my station, already thinking about the measurements I wanted to review. Then I saw the mess. One of the table legs I had cut yesterday lay on the floor. Not slipped, dropped. A fresh scrape cut across the edge. The clamp on my workstation was twisted sideways, and a hammer I didn't use sat under the table like someone tossed it there. I stopped right where I was and looked at everything carefully. Placement, angles, impact marks. It wasn't hard to read. This was deliberate. Ruth came in a minute later. She pushed the door open with her shoulder, heading toward her bench, until she noticed the damaged leg in my hands. "You finding surprises this morning?" she asked, stepping closer. This was waiting for me. She inspected the twisted clamp, then the hammer. She didn't touch anything yet, just scanned the area slowly. "Someone put effort into this. It wasn't an accident." "No," she agreed. Caroline arrived just then, carrying 2 coffees. She handed me one, smiling, until she followed my eyes to the floor. Her expression changed immediately. Who did this? Ruth didn't speculate. She walked straight to the security monitor on the wall and tapped in her code. Let's see who had access last night. We watched the feed in silence. At 11:45 p.m., when the workshop was closed and the lights were dimmed, 2 figures slipped in through the side door. They moved quickly, nervously, checking the corners like teenagers sneaking into a garage. Ruth zoomed in. Laura. Victor. Laura lifted the hammer. Victor hovered behind her, whispering something I couldn't hear. Laura struck the table leg twice. He knocked tools off my stand. She laughed, shoved him, and they walked out as if they had done something clever. Caroline exhaled hard. There it is. Ruth folded her arms. They didn't even try to hide. Caroline turned toward me. This is because of Christmas. They want you rattled. I placed the damaged leg on the table gently. They expect a reaction. You're not giving them one? Caroline asked. Not yet. Ruth studied my face for a moment. You're holding your line. I'm choosing the right moment. She nodded once. That matters. Caroline shook her head. I want to drive to their house and ask what's wrong with them. No, I told her. Let them think they did damage. They did, she argued. They didn't damage me, I replied. Just the wood. Ruth hit pause on the footage. Do you want me to report this? Not today. Caroline crossed her arms. You're planning something. I'm planning to finish the table. Ruth gave a short, approving grunt. Then let's rebuild the leg. I grabbed a fresh plank from the stack. The surface was cold under my hand, solid, ready. Ruth stood beside me as I measured the new piece. Mark twice, she reminded. I already did. Good. I cut the plank on the saw, steady and firm. The line came out smooth and clean. Even better than yesterday's cut. Ruth inspected the edge. This is tighter. Pressure has a way of sharpening people. I'm not interested in pressure. I'm interested in accuracy. That's why it's working. I sanded the surface carefully, controlling each stroke. Caroline sat on a stool nearby, watching me with narrowed eyes. I'd still be yelling, she muttered. You'd waste your voice, I replied. That's why you're terrifying, she answered. You stay calm when everyone else blows up. Ruth glanced at me. Calm isn't weakness. No, I agreed. It's direction. Once the new leg was shaped, Ruth lined it up next to the damaged one. The difference was obvious. Yesterday's was good. Today's was exact. She tapped the new piece lightly. That belongs in the showcase. The guild will see it. Caroline picked up the damaged plank. What do we do with this one? Leave it, I told her. Let them think they slowed me down. Ruth's mouth twitched, her version of a smile. I like your strategy. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. Once, twice, then a third time. I ignored it until the work was finished. When I finally checked it, I saw the screen. 3 missed calls from Michael. 1 email. Subject, we need to talk. Caroline leaned in. What now? I opened the email. Mom, last night got out of hand. Let's not escalate anything. We should talk in person. Also, I need to discuss some updates about the estate before deadlines hit. Call me today. Michael, Caroline scoffed. There it is. Estate first, you second. I deleted the email. Ruth raised an eyebrow. You're not responding? No reason to. Good. I went back to sanding the underside of the tabletop. The workshop sounds returned to normal. Saws running, sanders humming, footsteps moving between stations. People walked past occasionally and glanced at the new leg. That's clean work, someone remarked. Nice edge control, another added. Ruth shot them a quick glance. She's consistent, she told them. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. By late afternoon, the structure pieces were ready for assembly. I wiped down my table, cleaned my tools, and hung the tape measure back on its hook. Ruth approached me again. Footage is safe. Whenever you want it brought to the guild committee, I'll handle it. I'll let you know. You will, she replied. Caroline walked me toward the door. They tried to knock you off balance, she said. They failed. You're not even angry? I'm exact, she nodded. That's worse for them. Outside, the cold air hit my face cleanly. The workshop lights flickered behind me as the rest of the guild closed up. They thought breaking one piece would stop me. They didn't realize they had just confirmed who they were and who I wasn't. When I stepped into the workshop the next morning, the damaged piece from yesterday was still sitting on my table. I left it there intentionally, not as something to dwell on, but as a marker of where things had gone wrong and where I intended to go right. I hung my coat, tightened my apron, and pulled a new plank from the rack. Ruth arrived shortly after. Her eyes went straight to the ruined leg and then to the fresh plank in my hands. "You're rebuilding?" she asked. "I am." "Good. Make it better this time." Her tone was crisp, not encouraging, more like she expected nothing less. I measured the plank, marked my lines, and positioned it on the saw. Blade up, hands steady, guide rail firm. The cut came out cleaner than anything I'd done before. Straight, tight, balanced. Ruth examined the edge. "Improvement under pressure. That's a good sign." "I'm not working under pressure," I replied. "I'm working with purpose. That's why it's good." I took the piece back to my station and began sanding. Every stroke was controlled, even consistent. My mind wasn't drifting to Michael's insults, or Laura's smirk, or the cold walk home. Today was about the table, the work. Guild members wandered by occasionally, slowing just enough to take a closer look at the new cut. "Nice line," one of them commented. "That's solid control," another noted. No pity, no tiptoeing, just recognition, clean and simple. Around noon, Caroline walked in carrying lunch. She placed a sandwich next to me. "You're rebuilding faster than I expected." "Faster and better." "That's obvious," she replied, glancing at the new leg. "They didn't slow you down at all." "No, they gave me something to refine." Caroline shook her head. "Anyone else would still be furious." "I'm focused," I told her. "That's what unnerves them," she muttered. "You don't break where they want you to." Ruth approached, arms crossed. "Don't rush the sanding." "I'm not." "It looks that way. I'm just efficient." Her mouth pulled slightly. "Good." By mid-afternoon, the second leg of the table was fully formed. The difference between yesterday's version and today's was undeniable. Yesterday's work was competent. Today's was disciplined. Ruth tapped the new piece with her knuckle. "This belongs in a showcase, not on a beginner's bench." "I'll finish the remaining components this week." "You will," she answered with certainty. As I began shaping the tabletop, my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. I ignored it until the sanding reached a stopping point. When I finally checked, I saw 3 missed calls from Michael. 1 email. The subject line read, "We need to talk." Caroline leaned forward. "What does he want now?" I opened the message. "Mom, let's keep things steady. Yesterday got out of hand. I think it's better if we talk face to face. Also, there are estate issues we need to review. Call me today." Caroline let out a tight breath. "Not a word about you. All about the estate." "I know. Are you answering him?" "No." "Good." I deleted the email without hesitation. Ruth, who had been sorting chisels nearby, glanced over. "You're not engaging." "No reason to." "That's stability," she remarked. "People like Michael don't know what to do with it." I returned to the tabletop. My strokes were smooth, steady, confident. The grain leveled out exactly how I wanted. Guild members passed again, each offering small comments that confirmed I was progressing. "That sanding looks even." "Your edge curve is consistent," Ruth observed quietly. "You hear that?" "I do. You earned it." When the main structure pieces were nearly complete, Ruth moved closer. "We'll begin assembly tomorrow." "I'll be here early." "I expect you will." Caroline rejoined me as people began cleaning up for the day. She held the damaged leg in her hands. "This one's a reminder," she said, "of the kind of people you're dealing with." "A reminder of their limits," I corrected. "Not mine." You're not shaken? No, I answered. I'm better. Caroline smirked. They're going to hate that. I placed the newly sanded tabletop on a padded mat and wiped down my entire station. Tools in place, surfaces clean, dust swept, order restored. Ruth glanced my way once more. The guild will take you seriously, not because of the drama, because of the work. That's the only reason I want. And the right one, she replied. Caroline walked me to the exit. You know, you're getting stronger because of them. Then they accidentally helped me. Help they're going to regret. I didn't smile, but I didn't disagree. Outside, the air was sharp with cold. The workshop lights behind me faded as the last person locked up. My hands smelled like wood and sandpaper, steady, grounded, busy with something real. The evergreen table was growing piece by piece, and every new piece made me steadier than before. I arrived at the workshop early the next morning, expecting another long day of sanding and fitting joints. The air felt brighter than usual, not warm, just active, like everyone else already sensed something was moving. Ruth was checking clamps at the far end of the room. Caroline stood by the bulletin board reading something I couldn't see from where I was. The moment she spotted me, she lifted her hand. Marion, you need to come here. Her tone wasn't alarmed. It was focused. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked over. Ruth followed, arms crossed the way she always held them when she was evaluating a situation. Caroline pointed to the large announcement sheet pinned to the board. At the very top, bold letters read, Winter Showcase Finalists, Snowpine Guild. And listed in the center, between two of the guild's experienced builders, Evergreen Table, Builder, Marion Hale. I stood still for a moment. Not frozen, not overwhelmed, just absorbing. Caroline nudged my shoulder lightly. You did it. Ruth's arms loosened. Your work earned its place. I touched the edge of the paper, not to confirm, but to acknowledge. When does the showcase begin? In 2 days, Ruth informed. Preparation starts now. Caroline grinned. Everyone's been talking about your table. Quietly, but consistently. They didn't expect a newcomer to place this high. I'm not here to impress anyone, I responded. That's why it works, she replied. Guild members began gathering around the board, reading the list, murmuring comments. No one disputed my placement, no side glances, no whispers of disbelief, just acceptance. One of the younger members stepped forward. Your edge work on the legs was cleaner than last year's winners. Another added, that sanding job on the top? That's showcase level. Ruth gave a short nod toward me. You're in the right category. I returned to my station and uncovered the tabletop. The grain still looked sharp from yesterday's sanding. The legs sat neatly aligned on the rack. Everything was ready for final checkups before assembly. Caroline placed a small clipboard next to me. This is your showcase prep list. Lighting test, stability check, polish, transport box. Ruth helped me gather everything so you don't have to hunt it down. I scanned the list. Clear steps. Nothing excessive. Thank you. Ruth stood beside me. Your table goes on the center row of the exhibition. Good placement. High foot traffic. I'll make sure it holds up under every angle. It will, Ruth replied firmly. Guild members continued stopping by throughout the morning, offering short acknowledgments. One woman pointed at the tabletop. The balance on this piece shows discipline. Another leaned in to check the joints. Your alignment is consistent. That's why it caught the judge's eyes. I didn't respond with excitement, only clarity. The work stands if the foundation is right, Caroline whispered. Journalists will be there, sponsors too. I'm not performing for them. You won't have to. The table speaks on its own. I began the showcase checklist. First step, a final grit sanding on the underside. Ruth watched closely, checking the pressure of my strokes. Even, she noted, intended. She shifted her attention to the legs. These are ready, no corrections needed. Caroline brought over the polish. Last step before fitting everything together. I applied the finish with smooth, confident strokes. The surface responded cleanly. No streaks, no hesitation marks, just the outcome of consistent work. Around midday, Ruth stepped away to answer a call. When she returned, she tapped the table lightly. "You'll want to hear this." Caroline raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" "One of the showcase sponsors contacted the guild," Ruth explained. "They asked about you specifically." Caroline blinked. "Already?" "Yes." I paused. "Did they mention why?" "They watched some early footage the guild released," Ruth replied. "Your workmanship caught their attention. They want to see it in person." Caroline smirked. "You're not even on the floor yet, and they already know your name." "It's the table they noticed," I corrected. "Not me." "Maybe, but you built it," Caroline countered. Ruth placed the transport crate next to my station. "Handle this carefully. Your piece will be moved tomorrow morning." I nodded. "I'll secure it myself." "You should," Ruth replied. "It's earned the protection." Guild members returned to their projects, but the energy around the room had shifted. There was movement, approval mixed with curiosity. Even those who barely acknowledged me during my first week now treated my station with a certain caution, as if the table held weight they couldn't ignore. Caroline watched their reactions with satisfaction. "You feel that? They're recalibrating how they see you." "I'm not here for their opinion." "No, but people reveal themselves when standards rise." I assembled the legs with deliberate precision. Everything aligned perfectly on the first fit. No adjustments needed. Ruth inspected the structure from each angle. "Stable," she confirmed. "Display ready." Caroline clapped once. "This is happening. You're officially in the showcase. No one can take that from you." I covered the table with the protective cloth and stepped back. Not emotional, not overwhelmed, just certain. "This isn't the end," I told them. "It's the doorway." Ruth signaled agreement. "And you walked through it because you showed up and did the work." Caroline folded her arms proudly. "Tomorrow, your table goes to Snowpine Hall. Day after that, you stand in front of an audience who'll know exactly what you built." I didn't need applause. I didn't need validation. The recognition was simple and earned. The evergreen table held its place on the finalist list, and I held mine beside it. Snowpine Hall was already crowded when I arrived. The air buzzed with conversations, footsteps, and the clatter of crates being opened. Volunteers were checking lighting. Judges walked around with clipboards. Visitors were drifting in early just to get a first look at the finalists. Ruth stood near the entrance, waving me over. "Your table's already on the floor. Center row. Good placement." Caroline joined us with 2 passes in her hand. They started taking photos of the finalists. Reporters are here sooner than expected. I clipped the pass to my jacket. "Let's check the setup." We walked across the exhibition hall. People were already gathered around the evergreen table, not gawking, studying. A man in a gray coat crouched to inspect the joinery. A woman in glasses ran her hand over the top to check the smoothness. A couple took pictures. Ruth stepped aside so I could see the table clearly. It looked solid under the lighting, balanced, sharp, exactly how it needed to be. "That's showcase quality," Ruth commented. "You earned this spot." Caroline added, "People are reacting, quietly but strongly." Before I could respond, Laura's voice cut through the crowd like a blade. "There she is," she announced loudly. "The woman who walked out on Christmas and made a scene in front of her own family." Heads turned. The room didn't go silent, but the shift was immediate. People looked from her to me, curious, unsure what was happening. Laura strutted forward with a forced smile plastered on her face. Victor hovered behind her, looking less confident, but still following her lead. "Everyone," Laura called out, addressing the surrounding crowd as if rehearsed. "I just want to warn you. Marion here has been unstable lately. Ever since Christmas, she's been lashing out, creating stories, leaving the family confused." Caroline stepped closer to me with her jaw clenched. Ruth didn't move, but her eyes sharpened. Victor chimed in. "She stormed out on us. We're just trying to help her, but she's been dramatic and unpredictable." A few visitors exchanged uneasy glances. A judge paused mid-note. I stood straight. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself emotionally. I just met Laura's eyes. "Tell the full story," I told her evenly. Or don't speak at all. Laura blinked, momentarily thrown off. I am telling it. Then mention the part where Michael shoved my chair away and told me I was wasting space in front of your entire table, I replied calmly. The people near us shifted. Several whispered things like, "He said that to his mother? And that's rough." Victor attempted to regain control. "You're twisting it." "No," I interrupted, maintaining eye contact with him. "You two broke into the workshop after hours and damaged my project the same night. I saw the footage." Gasps rippled through the nearby crowd. Laura snapped her head toward Victor. "She's lying." Ruth stepped forward. "No, she isn't. The security system recorded everything. Guild leadership will be reviewing it." A woman in a red scarf muttered, "They sabotaged her work." A man behind her responded, "That's low, especially during showcase week." Laura looked around, realizing the room wasn't with her. Her confidence wavered. "This is a misunderstanding." Caroline crossed her arms. "Funny how misunderstandings only happen when you're holding the hammer." More whispers, more eyes on them, less sympathy. Victor tugged her arm gently. "We should go." "No," Laura hissed back. "She's making us look—" "You did that yourself," I told her, not raising my voice, "and you're continuing to." She froze, not because of volume, but because there was nothing for her to counter. No emotion she could weaponize, no weakness she could point to. Ruth nodded toward hall security. "Escort them out. They have no authorization to be here." 2 security staff walked up. "We'll take it from here." Laura's face flushed an angry red. "You can't remove us! We're family!" One guard replied, "This is guild property today, and you're disrupting the event." Victor dropped his eyes. Laura kept arguing as security guided them out, but the crowd had already turned away from her. People focused on me again, this time with a different expression. Respect. Not pity. Recognition. A woman stepped forward. "You handled that with more composure than most people could." A middle-aged sponsor added, "Public pressure reveals character. Yours is intact." Before I could respond, the doors opened sharply, and Michael entered. His expression was tense, angry, already looking for someone. When he spotted me, he marched straight across the hall. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "You're embarrassing me in front of the community." The entire row of visitors turned toward him. Judges paused their notes. The nearest couple stepped aside to get a better view. I didn't move. "You embarrassed yourself the night you told me I wasted space." "That was a private moment," he argued, voice rising. "You're twisting it." "You made it public," I replied. "Not me." People around us were fully invested now. One older gentleman shook his head. "Talking to your mother like that? Unacceptable." A woman whispered, "No leadership qualities at all." Michael heard the murmurs. His face tightened. He pulled out his phone instinctively, then froze. An email notification flashed across his screen. Big letters visible even from where I stood. "Board meeting postponed. Leadership concerns to be reviewed." Michael's breath caught. His confidence evaporated. He looked around and realized people weren't on his side, not because of me, but because of him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I only told him, "Respect begins at home." His expression collapsed. The hall didn't clap. It didn't need to. The silence around him was a verdict of its own. My table stood steady behind me, and he stood alone in front of everyone. The tension inside Snowpine Hall didn't fade after Michael showed up. If anything, the air tightened. People had stepped back, forming an unspoken circle around us. My table stood behind me like a steady anchor, but I didn't lean on it. I stood on my own. Ruth approached with the security team behind her. She held her phone in her hand. "Marion," she told me quietly, "it's time." I gave a small nod. Ruth turned to the hall's event coordinator. "Play this on the central display. It concerns guild ethics." The coordinator hesitated for half a second, then lifted a hand toward the tech crew. "Put it on." The overhead screens flickered. Conversations dimmed. Every head turned upward. Then the recording started. Laura and Victor appeared on the screen, walking into the workshop at 11:45 p.m. The hall reacted instantly. Gasps, whispers, shock rippling through rows of viewers. Laura swung the hammer. The footage caught the force clearly. Victor knocked tools to the floor. She laughed. He glanced around nervously. A woman in the audience covered her mouth. "They did that on purpose." Another muttered, "Unbelievable. During showcase week?" A group of guild members stepped closer, their expressions tightening. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was evidence. Ruth folded her arms. "This is exactly what we found this morning." Caroline moved to my side, her presence solid. "They targeted her work. They broke into guild property." The security guards didn't wait for discussion. They moved straight toward the back doors where Laura and Victor had been taken earlier. One guard spoke to the coordinator briefly, then walked off with determined steps. Across the hall, someone whispered, "They're getting banned for this, right?" Another responded, "Easily. The guild doesn't tolerate sabotage." Michael watched the screen from a distance, frozen in place. His posture buckled the moment he realized the entire hall was witnessing what his wife and brother-in-law had done. He looked around for support that wasn't there. He approached me again, but slower this time, almost unsteady. "Why would you show that? You're ruining everything." "I didn't ruin anything," I replied. "Your choices did." He rubbed his forehead. "You should have talked to me first. We could have handled this privately." "You weren't interested in privacy when you pushed my chair away at Christmas." Murmurs rose again. One older man near the front shook his head. "No respect at all. Unbelievable." A woman beside him added, "He's sinking his own reputation." Michael heard every word. Trying to salvage control, he glanced toward the judges. "This is a personal matter." One judge immediately responded, "This is guild property. It ceased being personal the moment your family damaged workshop equipment." Ruth stepped forward and targeted a contestant's piece. Another guild member joined. "We value integrity here. Without it, nothing we build holds." Michael's jaw clenched. "You're overreacting." The oldest guild member, a man with decades of experience written across his face, looked him straight in the eye. A man who cannot speak to his mother with respect should not lecture a room about integrity. The hall reacted with a collective shift, approval, disappointment, and judgment mixing in equal parts. Michael pulled out his phone again, checking something urgently. I knew exactly what he was looking for, validation from somewhere else. But when he unlocked the screen, a new email flashed across his inbox. Subject: Immediate review. Leadership conduct concerns. The preview line visible beneath it read, "Board meeting postponed until further notice. Senior partners request clarification regarding recent behavior." Caroline leaned slightly toward me. "That's hitting him where it hurts." Ruth's tone remained steady. "Consequences arrive when a pattern is undeniable." Michael swallowed hard, eyes darting between the email and the watching crowd. For the first time since Christmas, he looked small, like he finally recognized how far his actions had spread. He tried one more angle. "Mom, can we talk outside? Just for a minute?" "I'm not stepping outside to fix what you broke," I answered. "You created this moment, not me." His face tightened. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." "You're under pressure because you expected control, not accountability." People behind him whispered again. "He's falling apart. His mother's handling this better than he is. She's calm. He's not." Michael lifted a hand as if to quiet the room, but no one was listening. The authority he always assumed he had simply wasn't there. The event coordinator approached the judges. "Do you want to announce the disciplinary decision now?" One judge nodded. "Yes." He addressed the hall, voice firm. "Effective immediately, Laura and Victor are barred from guild access for 2 years. Their conduct violated ethical standards and compromised workshop integrity." Ruth added, "And all entrants are assured that sabotaged pieces will be reviewed for fairness in judging. The evergreen table remains fully eligible." The audience clapped, not loudly but with conviction. It wasn't applause for drama, it was approval for clear action. Michael stood amid that sound, sinking in it. He stepped closer to me once more, softer, unsteady. "I didn't know it would go this far." It went this far because you never expected the truth to reach other people. He shook his head. I just wanted to protect our family. You protected your pride, I corrected, not your family. The judge nearest us added quietly, respect is the first requirement of leadership. You failed that before today. Michael looked down. For the first time, he didn't argue. Ruth tapped my elbow. You handled this well. Caroline nodded. You were steady. He wasn't. The evergreen table behind me stayed exactly where it belonged, untouched, admired, steady under the lights. Michael, for the first time in his adult life, had nothing left to stand on but the truth he tried to avoid. Snowpine Hall didn't calm down after the video played. If anything, the atmosphere sharpened. People spoke in lowered voices, glancing between the screen, the judges, and the evergreen table standing steady in the center row. I stayed where I was, hands lightly resting on the edge of the display stand, not posing, just steady. A guild assistant approached me. Ms. Hale, the committee needs you backstage for a brief review. I nodded and followed him. Ruth and Caroline walked behind me without being asked. The backstage room was small, 5 chairs, a folding table, and the 5-person guild review panel already seated. Their serious faces didn't intimidate me. They were simply doing their job. The chairwoman gestured toward the open seat. Marion, thank you for coming. We need clarification on the workshop incident. I sat down with a straight posture. Ask what you need. The youngest panel member leaned forward. When did you notice the damage? This morning. You didn't report it immediately, another added. We want to understand why. I held the footage, I explained, calm and clear. Not to hide anything. I waited because justice requires accuracy, not panic. I didn't want drama to affect the workshop or the community before the showcase. The oldest panelist tapped his pen thoughtfully. You exercised restraint. Most would have gone public right away. Restraint isn't silence, I replied. I simply watched long enough to understand what I was dealing with. A woman on the end asked, You anticipated they might expose themselves further? I anticipated they would act without thinking, I answered. That's what they've done from the beginning. The chairwoman exchanged glances with the others. Your approach prevented chaos in the guild during a high-stakes week. Caroline stood beside me, arms crossed. She protected the process when she had every right to blow it up. Ruth added, and she still did the work. Better than most finalists, under no pressure at all. The panelists nodded. The youngest member asked one final question. Were you concerned the incident would affect your standing in this showcase? No, I told him. If the table wasn't good enough on its own, sabotage wouldn't save it. And if it was good enough, nothing they did would bury it. He leaned back, slowly, impressed. The chairwoman stood. Thank you, Marion. You may return to the hall while we finalize our decision. I left the room with Ruth and Caroline. The hallway outside was lined with visitors, whispering about what they'd just seen on the big screen. Some looked at me with quiet recognition. Not pity, not sympathy, just acknowledgement. Back in the hall, people gravitated toward the evergreen table. More hands traced the edges. More eyes studied the joints. A design professor from a local college approached and examined the structure closely. This piece carries moral structure, she remarked. Steady hands made this. I nodded once. Thank you. A young couple approached next. Are you taking commissions after the event? I'm focusing on the showcase right now, I replied. Orders can wait. That tells us everything we need to know, the husband commented. Quality over rush. Before long, the hall lights dimmed slightly, a signal that the guild verdict was ready. The judges stepped onto the small stage at the front, and a hush settled over the room. The chairwoman lifted the microphone. Thank you all for your patience. After review, we have reached our decision. People leaned in. I didn't move. First, she continued, regarding the workshop incident, Laura and Victor are hereby suspended from all guild facilities and events for 2 years due to intentional damage of guild property and interference with a finalist's work. Ripples of approval moved through the crowd. Next, the chairwoman's expression shifted to a more formal tone. Second, the evergreen table has been reviewed thoroughly. Despite attempts to compromise its progress, the craftsmanship, precision, and structural discipline remain exceptional. The hall grew still. And so, she announced, we are proud to award the top winner of the Winter Showcase to a beat. Then, The Evergreen Table by Marion Hale. Applause broke instantly, not loud and chaotic, but solid, confident, as if the room had been waiting to exhale. People turned toward me. Ruth gave a firm nod. Caroline grabbed my hand briefly, her grip tight with pride. I stepped forward, not rushing, not performing, just moving with clarity. The chairwoman handed me the engraved plaque. "Your work speaks for you," she told me. "I appreciate the recognition," I replied. "Standards should speak louder than circumstances." The applause deepened at that, not for theatrics, but because the sentence hit truthfully. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Michael standing near the back of the hall. His shoulders were slumped, his expression defeated. Sponsors avoided making eye contact with him. Community members didn't approach. The silence around him was colder than anything I could have delivered myself. One sponsor whispered to another, "He's not someone we want leading anything." Another replied, "His mother handled this entire week with more professionalism than he has in years." Michael heard it. His face tightened. Meanwhile, visitors and guild members approached me, not to swarm, but to offer brief, grounded congratulations. "You earned it." "Clean work, Ms. Hale." "Your steadiness showed." I acknowledged each one with a short nod. Behind me, Laura and Victor were nowhere to be seen. Their absence said enough. The evergreen table no longer needed to prove anything. Neither did I. I stepped away from the noise of the hall once the award ceremony wrapped up. Ruth stood near the side exit, keeping a small circle of space around me. She knew I needed a moment to breathe, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I needed a clear head for whatever came next, and I was right to expect trouble. Michael approached fast, cutting through the crowd with a tense jaw and eyes that refused to settle. He stopped just a few feet from me and lowered his voice, trying to control the situation through pressure. "Mom, we need to talk. Now." His tone was tight, clipped, the kind a man uses when he realizes he's losing the room. I kept my posture square and my voice level. "I don't respond to demands." People nearby slowed down, pretending not to listen, but unable to look away. Michael glanced around, aware of the eyes landing on him. His confidence wavered. He leaned closer. "My partners are questioning my leadership. The board postponed tomorrow's meeting until further notice. They want time to reassess. Do you understand what that means for me?" "I understand exactly what it means," I answered. "And it didn't happen because of me." His frustration flared. "You exposed me." "No," I countered calmly. "You exposed yourself. Respect begins at home. Everyone saw that today." Michael exhaled sharply and reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a packet of papers, contract length, clipped neatly. He held them out as if they were my responsibility. "This is the co-ownership agreement for your estate. Just sign it. It'll show my board that things are stable." I didn't touch the papers. My estate isn't a performance prop. "It's not a prop," he insisted, pushing them closer. "It's proof. They need reassurance that I can manage family matters without drama." I held eye contact. "Then you need to learn how to treat family with respect." A couple standing near the door exchanged glances. One of them whispered, just loud enough for Michael to hear, "He's talking to his mother like she's an assistant." Michael's shoulders stiffened. He heard it. He knew others did too. He pressed the papers into my hands, almost pleading. "Mom, please. I'm already hanging by a thread. The board is watching everything. If they think I don't have a grip on this, I could lose my position." "I'm not here to fix your image," I replied, "and I'm certainly not signing anything on demand." His voice cracked, not from emotion, but from losing leverage. "Can we at least discuss it?" "You dismissed me at Christmas dinner," I reminded him. "Right in front of your wife's family. You pushed my chair back. You told me I wasted space. So today, I'm giving you something you never gave me. Clarity. Michael's throat flexed as he swallowed. His eyes darted around the hall again, checking who might be watching. Several people were. They didn't bother hiding it. A soft voice emerged behind me. Caroline stepped closer. "Everything all right here?" Michael tried to muster composure. "We're having a private conversation." Caroline didn't flinch. "Nothing in this hall is private right now." Her steady presence reminded me that I didn't need to carry the weight of this moment alone. I turned back to Michael. "A mother is not a legal instrument," I told him. "You don't get to use me for leverage." His lips parted, but nothing came out. For the first time that evening, he truly looked lost. Ruth moved to my side. "Marion," she murmured, "you don't owe him anything." Michael's frustration cracked into desperation. "Mom, please, you can't walk away from me." "I'm not walking away," I replied. "I'm drawing a line." His face tightened. Shame burned through him as a young couple passed by, whispering, "She's handling this better than he is." I stepped toward the exit, leaving him standing with the unsigned papers. Ruth and Caroline walked with me, creating a small wall of support. Once we reached the cold air outside the hall, I took out my phone. My hands were steady. My thoughts were clear. I typed a message to Michael. Short, direct, undeniable. "Michael, the estate remains under my sole authority. You will not interfere with it again. I still care for you, but I will not tolerate disrespect or manipulation. Take responsibility for your own choices." Mom. I paused for 1 second, reviewing every word. There was no anger in it, only boundaries. Then I pressed send. The moment the checkmark appeared, I blocked his number. 1 tap, clean, final. Ruth exhaled softly. "That's the cleanest ending you could offer him." Caroline nodded. "You kept your dignity. He has to face his own mess now." I looked toward the hall through the glass doors. Michael stood inside, still clutching the contract he had expected me to sign instantly. He looked smaller than he had an hour ago, not because I diminished him, but because the truth finally caught up to him. I turned away from the scene and tightened my coat. Snow drifted across the walkway. The night felt cold, steady, honest. Ruth placed a hand on my arm. "Ready to go home?" I gave a small nod. "Yes, I'm done carrying what isn't mine." We walked toward the car. Behind us, the hall lights glowed through the falling snow. But I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had made my boundary, and it would hold. The cafe across from Snowpine Hall was small, warm, and quiet enough for me to settle my thoughts after the long night. Helen held the door for me, and the moment we stepped inside, the scent of fresh coffee wrapped around us. I chose a table by the window, wanting a clear view of the hall in case anything else unfolded. Helen removed her gloves and placed them beside her cup. "You held yourself steady in there," she murmured. "Most people would have cracked." "I spent years learning when to stand still," I replied. "Tonight put that training to use." We hadn't been seated for even 2 minutes before the first person approached. A woman in her 70s with bright eyes and careful posture rested her hand on the back of my chair. "You stood up for every one of us," she told me. "Some of us know exactly what it's like to be pushed aside by our own." Her voice carried experience, not bitterness. I met her gaze and offered a nod. "Thank you for coming over." She squeezed my shoulder gently before moving on. A young family approached next, parents in their 30s with a toddler holding a wooden toy. The father stepped forward. "We'd like to order a full-size evergreen table," he explained. "Your design has the strength we want in our home." I kept my tone even. "I'm honored, but I don't take payments at events or cafes. Leave your contact information, and I'll reach out once my studio schedule is set." The mother lit up. "Of course. We'll support you however we can." After they left their names in my notebook, I glanced at Helen. She smirked gently. "Look at that. You're already booked, and you haven't even opened anything." A couple in their 50s approached next. The wife leaned in a little. We want 2 matching chairs, simple, strong, no frills. We weren't planning to order anything today, but your work and your composure convinced us. I wrote their request down, keeping my handwriting neat. I'll contact you when I'm ready to start. One by one, more locals came. Some only offered encouragement. Others asked questions about the wood, the tools, the finishing process. Not a single person mentioned Michael directly, but many of their expressions told me they understood the full story. A young reporter from the Snowpine Gazette appeared near the edge of the table, adjusting her press badge nervously. "Mrs. Hale," she began, "could I have a short interview for our next issue? Your showcase entry and your presence tonight made quite an impression." Helen raised her brows, silently nudging me to consider it, but I kept my answer steady. "I appreciate your interest, but I don't want attention right now. Let me finish my work before I talk about it publicly." The reporter nodded respectfully and handed me her card. "Whenever you're ready." When she walked away, Helen leaned closer. "You know that would help your new studio launch." "I know," I replied. "But I want the work to lead, not the drama." Helen let out a quiet breath. "That's why people respect you." Eventually, the crowd around my table thinned, and quiet settled again. Snow drifted outside the window, softening the lights from the hall. I sipped the last of my coffee before standing up. "I want to check on the table before the guild moves it," I told Helen. She followed me back across the street to the workshop, where evergreen was still displayed under warm lights. The room was empty when we entered. The table sat exactly where the guild had placed it, clean and simple under the overhead lamp. I stepped closer and rested my fingertips on the smooth surface. The grain lines were crisp, honest, unhidden. Nothing about it needed explaining. "This piece carries your discipline," Helen noted quietly, "and your clarity." I tapped one corner lightly to test stability. Solid, level, ready. A few minutes passed in silence, but it wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence that comes from finishing something the right way. Helen studied me as I circled the table once more. "What's going through your mind?" "That people don't always see you when they should," I answered, "but eventually they do. Tonight proved that." She touched my arm. "You're seen now, Marion." I breathed in slowly, then exhaled. "Yes, I am." For the first time in a long while, recognition wasn't tied to family, obligation, or guilt. It was tied to my work, my choices, my integrity. Before leaving, I checked the edges and joints again, making sure everything met my standard. Then I closed the workshop door and locked it carefully. Outside, the cold air felt cleaner, not lighter, just honest. Helen wrapped her scarf tighter. "What's next for you?" "I'm going to build, with intention, with standards, and without noise." She smiled and linked her arm with mine. Snowpine chose the right woman. We walked toward this parking lot as clusters of people still lingered outside Snowpine Hall, quietly talking about the event. A few waved at me. Others offered nods of respect, not because of what happened to Michael, but because of how I had carried myself. That difference mattered. When we reached Helen's car, I looked back one more time, not at the hall, not at the crowd, not at the chaos Michael created, just at the simple glow coming from the workshop window. "I'm seen now," I whispered, and this time the words felt true. 3 days after the showcase, I unlocked the door of the small building I had rented at the edge of Snowpine. It wasn't large, but it had clean windows, a sturdy floor, and enough space for tools, lumber, and a workbench. It was all I needed. Ruth arrived first, carrying a folded wooden sign she'd finished the night before. She pushed the door open with her elbow. "Ready to hang this?" she asked, lifting the sign toward me. The carved letters were simple and sharp. "Evergreen Studio," by Marion Hale. I ran my fingers over the grooves. "It'll do just fine." Helen joined us a moment later, holding a small step stool and a tin of brass screws. "Let's get it up before people start wandering by." The 3 of us worked together. Ruth lifted the sign, Helen steadied the stool, and I secured each screw until the board sat firm above the entrance. When we stepped back, the morning sun hit the fresh wood just enough for the letters to stand out. Helen crossed her arms. "It looks right, like it belongs here." "It does," I answered, "and so do we." Soon after, neighbors from the community began drifting in. A group of women brought a small bouquet wrapped in brown paper. One of them extended it to me. "We thought your studio deserved a proper welcome," she offered. I thanked her and placed the flowers inside, near the window so they could catch the light. A retired teacher arrived next with a small handcrafted wind chime made from thin wooden pieces. "For the door," she explained, "so the place never feels empty." I tied it to the hook above the entrance. When the breeze moved through, the soft tapping filled the air. It wasn't loud, just enough to remind me that the door had a new beginning attached to it. Once the visitors cleared, I walked back inside. For the first time in weeks, the room was truly mine. No raised voices, no pressure, no one monitoring or interfering, just me, my tools, and the work. I stood in the center of the workshop, taking inventory of everything I'd brought. Clamps, chisels, sanders, measuring tape, wood glue, gloves, safety goggles. Ruth had donated a drawer set. Helen had contributed a portable heater. The place felt prepared, even though it was brand new. Ruth leaned against the door frame. "What's on your list today?" "Placing the evergreen table," I replied. "It belongs at the front." Helen moved to help me lift it. Together we carried the table into the studio and set it beneath the wide front window. Sunlight hit the polished wood, revealing every clean line, every joined edge, every carefully sanded surface. It looked like it had been made for this exact room. "I want people to see the work before they see me," I told them. "That's the rule from now on." Ruth tapped the table lightly. "Your skill does the talking." Helen brushed her hands off. "You earned every inch of this place." I walked around the table once more, checking its placement. The room felt balanced, purposeful, honest. A soft knock came from the doorway. A woman in her 60s stepped inside, carrying a small notebook. Her coat was still zipped, as if she hadn't expected to stay long. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she began. "I heard you opened today." "You're welcome to come in," I replied. She glanced around the studio, then focused on the table. "My granddaughter is turning 12. She reads every night. I'd like a small reading table for her, something sturdy she can use for years." I nodded once. "I can do that. Let me write down your details." She handed me her information, thanked me, and left with a quiet smile. Minutes later, an older man walked in, his steps slow but steady. He pointed to the evergreen table. "You make chairs to match?" he asked. "Yes," I answered. "Straight back or rounded?" "Rounded," he replied. "I want one for my den, something reliable." I took his order as well. He left looking satisfied. Helen chuckled. "You've been open 20 minutes and already have 2 commissions." "That's plenty for a first morning," I replied. "The rest will come when it's time." As the foot traffic slowed again, Helen rested beside the door, studying me. "Marion, do you miss home at all?" I knew what she meant. Not the building where Michael lived, but the idea of family, tradition, and familiarity. "I never left home," I answered. "I left the noise." Helen nodded softly. "That's a clean way to put it." Ruth glanced around the workshop. "You've built something stable. That's more than most people manage after being pushed out of their own space." "I wasn't pushed out," I corrected. "I walked out." They both acknowledged the distinction. The afternoon stretched quietly. I organized tools, labeled drawers, checked lumber inventory, and mapped out a rough schedule for upcoming orders. It wasn't frantic work. It was controlled, deliberate, and fully mine. While I worked, the wind chime rattled lightly whenever someone opened the door. Each time, a neighbor stepped inside for a quick hello, a supportive handshake, or a short compliment for the studio. There was no rush, no pressure, and no expectation beyond sincerity. Late in the day, sunlight settled low in the window. It caught the top of the evergreen table again, making the surface glow. I rested both hands on the wood, grounding myself. 50 years of caring for others had stretched me thin. Today was the first time I stood fully in a space that reflected me alone, my skill, my discipline, my choices. Helen looked over from the heater she was adjusting. "What's on your mind?" "That this chapter makes sense," I answered. "Every step led here, even the hard ones." She gave a thoughtful nod. A couple more neighbors stopped by before closing time, offering well wishes. When the last of them left, I pulled the door shut and the wind chime tapped once more. I stood there for a moment, taking in the sound. Then I smiled, small, steady, certain. "I didn't lose a family," I murmured. I reclaimed myself. Behind me, the studio lights glowed across the room. The sign Ruth carved hung firmly above the door. Orders waited in my notebook. The community stood with me. Growth wasn't loud. It was consistent. And mine had finally begun. When I look back on everything that happened, I realize one thing. Life doesn't always give you the family you hoped for. But sometimes it gives you the strength you didn't know you had. If you've ever felt pushed aside or treated like you didn't matter, I hope my story reminded you of this. Your worth doesn't vanish just because someone refuses to see it. Sometimes the most peaceful chapter starts the moment you choose yourself. Thank you for spending your time with me today. It means more than you know, and if this story touched you even a little, I'd love for you to stay with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps these stories alive. I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself, and don't let anyone dim your light.